Hello, I'm Ashley from the Motherhood Circle, and I've got another episode for you this week. Today, I sat down and had a chat with Nicole from Birth into Being about a very important topic, induction. You may know lots about induction, or you may not know induction at all. You may be sitting there pregnant, and maybe your care provider's talked to you about induction, and you're wondering if that's the right way to go for your birth. We're going to be talking about answering all of those questions today. There's going to be a lot of insight and information for you. So as I always say, snuggle up with a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, ice cold water, because I know it's hot sometimes in some places. Snuggle up and watch this episode. You're really going to enjoy it. Hey Nicole, thanks so much for coming on to our video series today. I'm so thrilled to have you.
Thank you very much, Ashley. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited to get talking about inductions today. So what do women need to know about inductions?
Well, the big one for me is that I think that women need to know that it's not always necessary. Induction is way overused, and it's more often the case that all of the reasons that are given prior to an induction, things like the size of the baby, lack of fluids, due dates, things like that they just kind of go out the window once the baby is actually born. And because the parents and the mother are all caught up with the new baby, they never actually come back and revisit that information. And unless, of course, things go terribly awry and they go back through their notes and they discover that, well, the induction was never necessary to begin with. And this is a really pivotal piece of information for women to know and for it to be absolutely broadcast amongst pregnant women, because induction is often the starting point of a whole, as they say, cascade of interventions. I think that phrase was coined by Dr. Sarah Buckley. And those interventions can be stopped right at the get-go if a woman doesn't go for induction. So it's a really important piece of the puzzle, and it's often the starting point for a whole journey that doesn't necessarily need to happen.
I guess also, can we explain a little bit about what an induction is? You don't have to give a big explanation, but just let our viewers know what an induction is in case they haven't heard of what an induction is.
Sure. Well, an induction is when a baby is induced, when a labour is induced, when for whatever reason, as I've said, some of them are quite questionable, a woman's care provider determines that she needs to have her labour manually begun. And
artificially, and it's going against physiological birth, isn't it? It's an artificial process of jump-starting labour and going against the body in many ways to force something to happen, isn't it?
It is. It's a jump start, a kick start, and there's different methods, of course. Stretch and sweep, the administering of Oxytocin, which is a synthetic form of oxytocin, which the body, left to its own devices, will produce ample amounts of. And it basically, it's like a false start for the baby's arrival. And of course, and with all of this discussion, I want to give an absolute disclaimer that, there are circumstances in which medical intervention is extremely necessary. We are so lucky to have it for that small percentage of births of which it is necessary. But for a huge amount of births, there is a lot of intervention and a lot of procedures that are carried out that aren't actually necessary. And so a woman these days needs to be extremely well educated to be able to ascertain when it is necessary and when it's not, and how to ask pertinent questions of her care providers.
Yeah, and I think this is such a good conversation because induction is such a common thing to happen around birth. And I know so many women, I think someone quoted me the other day, it was 32 or 33% of Australian women are having induced births. And then through the cascade of interventions, there's things happening that possibly wouldn't have happened before, like cesarean births are caused from the inductions, and it goes on a whole different path of when it wouldn't necessarily need to. And I think being so normal that so many women are having these inductions, it's a great conversation to have to explain, so women can get informed and actually have a think and do some research to see if an induction is being proposed to them, that they can actually ascertain whether that's something that they want to go through, whether that's going to be beneficial for them or for their baby, and make that informed choice. So I wanted to ask you as well, we were talking about the parts of the psyche that taps in when you're going through that recommended induction. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, women these days don't need an incredible amount of encouragement to think negatively of themselves and to disbelieve in their body's natural processes. In 2019, we have come a long way, generally, from having trust in our bodies and trust in birth. There's a whole bunch of reasons why that is the case, as well as the mass media approach being one of real sensationalism around birth. And, there's a whole tendency to publish scary stories and but that's also a known phenomena amongst women themselves, my theory is that there's not enough support postpartum for women who have suffered through traumatic births, and then they go through their life trying to process and ease that burden. And sometimes that means talking about their birth at any available opportunity about how horrible it was. And that's really difficult for pregnant women. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of things that tap into a woman's psyche and her disbelief in her body's ability to give birth naturally. Our media, ourselves, the fact that high intervention and traumatic birth is absolutely statistically on the rise. So that is what a woman sees in her own circle of friends and family. So, she's quite sort of psychologically open to the idea that, birth is just really, really difficult and that she may not be able to do it. And then there's the generational trauma, which is kind of like a deeper level of where, after a few generations of families and the female lineage being traumatized by birth, it's not a big jump at all for a woman to think, I can't do it. There's a lot of people who, choose an elective cesarean based primarily on that belief system that I can't do it. My body can't do it. I'm not strong enough. I'm not enough. And yeah, we are, as a culture, the easy path is to believe that our fear is stronger than our courage. And that's pretty sad. And that's what basically taps straight into when a woman is encouraged to have an induction. It's usually around things like, well, the baby's getting very big.
Yeah.
And, or, there's this thing presenting. And so we think that, and it taps straight into the fear. Whereas a woman's courage can be equally as strong. And we all know that birth is very intense, but it's still safe in that intensity. And unfortunately, because that's not a predominant belief system, it's very, very easy for women to just tap right into that fear, that lack of belief in themselves, in their body, their lack of kind of embodied knowledge of birth, because, their aunties and their sisters and their mothers, and quite possibly their own birth wasn't like that, or what didn't unfold in a normal, natural, physiological way. They've got all these stories going on inside their head, and like I said, potentially from their own birth. So in the very cells of their body, a belief that birth is scary and traumatic.
And I can say from my experience, because I was taught down the intervention path with my first, I had a diagnosis of GD, and from the very first moment that I was told I had GD, I was told that I would have an induction. And I didn't believe that I had a choice. I was told this is what's going to happen, and you're going to have an induction at 38 weeks, and this is what's going to happen. And I was never really told about what would happen in the induction, or, you know, that there could be a failure and there could be this. And that was what, and then I went through my pregnancy. I'm having an induction. Yay, I'm going to have my baby at 38 weeks. And you've already been set up to, you know, accept that reality rather than going in empowered and knowing that you actually have a choice as well, you know, whether you allow certain interventions or inductions to happen as well. I know that we were going to talk about some of the potential long-term outcomes with induction, because there's many different potential long-term outcomes. Could you explain a little bit about that for us as well, please?
Yeah, well, I am a strong believer that the way we give birth has a very big impact on the way we parent, the way we love, the way we live our subsequent years. I was blessed with amazing births myself, and I know in my bones how much it has contributed to my mothering. And when a birth is disempowering, when the experience is taken away from a mother, and she's not lucky enough to be able to call her births amazing, and she may instead use words like disempowering, traumatic, exhausting,
failure,
you know, horrible, terrifying, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I work with a lot of second-time mothers, so, you know, I get to hear all of these stories. And the ways in which women describe their birth, and very often, as we talked about at the beginning, that whole journey begins with induction. So when a woman experiences that whole cascade of interventions and she feels completely out of control and that she has no say whatsoever in her own experience, as well as, you know, disappointment and, you know, a feeling of loss over that experience, she also doesn't get to receive you know, depending on the type, you know, if it's just an induction, you know, she may still experience some degree of natural oxytocin production, particularly after the birth when breastfeeding kicks in. But quite often inductions lead to all these other interventions, and especially the use of strong painkillers, because it's just the birth comes on hard and fast and a woman can't cope. Before you know it, she's having an epidural. Before you know it, she's having other sorts of pain management. And that experience of being numbed from the intensity means that she hasn't met that fire inside of herself, which God knows we need that when we're mothering toddlers and when we're dealing with other challenges along the path of motherhood. We need to know what we are capable of. And so when induction is carried out, a woman doesn't get to meet that part of herself. She doesn't get to see her own inner warrior woman. She doesn't walk through this kind of archetypal doorway. And there's so much, you know, I mean, disempowering births and traumatic births are a number one cause of postnatal depression, as well as the fact that the hormones just haven't kicked in. So there's lots of long-term implications for induction. The other one is that intensity equals kind of unmanageable stress. So when, you know, when there's birth is approaching, there's the use of induction and then another whole cascade of interventions, and this kind of rising stress that then leads to things like a closed cervix that will eventually lead to a cesarean section. It just means that the mother loses this amazing opportunity to expand her comfort zone. And again, we need that as mothers. We need to be able to ride this huge spectrum of emotions. We need to be able to ride all sorts of waves of intensity as we navigate our relationships, for example, in the early years of mothering. There's so much that physiological birth sets us up for in our mothering and our parenting and our living and loving in this new identity as mother. And when we take that away, we take away all these other benefits. And
I just want to say as well,
it's a lost opportunity.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a lost opportunity for enormous growth and for enormous levels of expansion. And so that's for the mother.
Yeah.
And for the baby, there's a lost opportunity there of having this enormous hormonal influx of oxytocin, the hormone of love. Now, oxytocin doesn't, it's a pulsing hormone. And it's a hormone, and it's also a neurotransmitter. So it is an amazing sort of physiological response to intimacy and closeness and safety and connection. It's the same hormone that we release in enormous amounts when we orgasm and when we share a cuddle. You know, there's great little Facebook memes that go around saying, you know, if you have a close cuddle for at least 15 seconds, you can bring up your oxytocin levels.
Yeah.
But basically for our babies, we want them to come in feeling completely comfortable and expecting almost this high level of oxytocin. We want their sort of receptors, their oxytocin receptors, to be activated during their birth. So they're already experiencing all of that when they're in utero, but birth is such a pivotal event and leaves such strong imprints for a lifetime. And when they experience this rise peak of love that is like better than any drug ever accessed, synthetic drug ever accessed by mankind or womankind, it activates something in that child. And what it activates is actually the capacity to experience love. And, you know, we all want that for our babies. So, so that's one of the things that's not talked about in relation to induction, and it really should be.
It should be. I think if we had these conversations at the start and the doctors or whoever, the healthcare nurses and that, not healthcare nurses, but if our healthcare system was having these conversations, I think that there would be a completely different conversation in the way that we end up having our births, rather than not getting all the information about inductions. And also, I just want to put a disclaimer out there, because I know for some women who have had medicalized births, this can be a bit triggering to hear that their babies are not getting all this goodness. I know I went to Dr. Sarah Buckley's workshop on the Gold Coast, and I've had two unwanted medicalized births, and I sat there thinking, so basically you can have all these wonderful births, and I was like the worst and the worst, and I was like, my poor babies are missing out on everything. And there's nothing that we can do about those births. If they're done, there's nothing we can do. We can only prepare for a wonderful postpartum and bring that oxytocin into our lives. But we certainly can prepare for our next birth, and that's what this conversation is all about. If you're pregnant or planning another birth, that we can have these conversations and plan for our next birth. So I just wanted to put that in there as well.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, it's an extremely important piece of the puzzle, because actually we don't want anybody to feel any sense of guilt over what occurred. Definitely they can explore the experience, and especially if they're planning to have subsequent children, go back to their birth notes, sort it all out, write the letters that they need to write, and to seek healing, so that they don't carry a contracted memory of that experience, so that what did happen can be loved and let go. And that way, not only does it interfere less with subsequent births, but it also means that when as a mother, you're talking to your child about their entry to life, you can really speak of that experience from a healed place rather than a still wounded place, which will then also go a long way to having that baby kind of, absorb that story from this new healed place of acceptance and love and gratitude for what it has brought through, which is this beautiful baby. But yeah, like by no means, is this information intended to encourage further self-flagellation over what was or was not achieved. And at the same time, with all the difficulty that it brings, because it is a sensitive topic for so many women, we still have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Even if there's one or two people that just really can't, accept that information, or, they really don't want to hear it for whatever reason, we still have to go on talking, because and having that conversation, so that women can be more informed, and it can reduce the amount of traumatic births that people are experiencing. I mean, it's something like 1 in 3 at the moment. It's absolutely pathetic.
Yeah.
Statistics
if a woman
here
does
in Australia.
Yeah, I know, it's very hard.
The lucky country.
It's almost, I wouldn't want to say it, but it's almost impossible. And I had to fight very hard not to be induced in my second pregnancy. So I would love for you to share some of your tips and tell us, if a woman doesn't want to have an induction in this environment, what's the best way that she can, make sure the baby comes on its own sweet time, and for it to come in spontaneous labour and have that birth that she desires?
Yeah, well, it takes a lot of balls, or in this case, ovaries, to do that, because it basically means standing up to, generally, again, mass generalization, disclaimer, it involves standing up to the guy in the white coat. And, we are taught from a very young age that we shouldn't be questioning authority. It ties right into our sort of good girl conditioning, is that we should accept what we're told and go along with it and not rock the boat. And, I wish with all of my heart that we didn't have to be rocking anybody's boat when we're, 35 weeks pregnant. I wish that we didn't have to be over-engaging our cortex as we're journeying through pregnancy, and keep ourselves, intellectually informed of all these different things and hospital policies and statistics and da-da-da-da-da. Absolutely wish that this was not the case. However, today, Australia, 2019, it is the case. You need to be informed. And if you're not informed, then your birth partner, who is going to be there with you, needs to be informed. And sometimes that comes to a crunch in the labour ward, and sometimes it's like, in this case, we're talking about induction. It happens around 35 weeks when they start to say, yes, baby's getting quite big in there, and well, we might have to think about 38 weeks. And, it's become almost routine. I remember a few weeks ago, I posted an article where one of the medical organisations was proposing 38 weeks induction as the new normal.
39, I think 39 is the new normal. I think 38's been the norm, but 39 is the new. And it's crazy because they say versus, it's what their logic is 39 weeks, you will go into labour easier, or it's more successful at 39 weeks versus 41. And I said to them, this is what they said to me, and I said, well, how do you know? Because you've never put me in labour at 39 weeks, and you've never put me in labour at 41 weeks. So how can you say that about me as a person? It just blows my mind that they can make that, that they can actually bring that to the table and say that.
Yep. Well, there's a lot of things that are said that have really no grounding. And this is the thing, coming back to your question about how can we navigate this terrain. Well, unfortunately, you got to have your ovaries strong and firm, and you've got to be able to stand your ground. And I so wish it wasn't this way, but it is. You need to be informed. You need to be willing to say no. And you need to be able to ask pertinent questions, like the one that you just gave us an example of like, hang on a minute, you don't know this. Now, there is some sort of arguments around things like, oh, well, full-term babies these days are much bigger. because, because we're so, affluent as a society, and we have, plump babies and so on. I mean, really, like, women have been giving birth for centuries. This is absolutely ridiculous. And very, like I said at the beginning as well, very often these things that are said, once the baby's out, it's never actually revisited. Like, there's so many women who were told that they were going to have a big baby, and then it comes out, spot on average. And it's just gone. That whole statement that they were going to have a big baby, it's just gone. A lot of the risks that are proposed due to, like in your case, gestational diabetes, it just disappears and it's never mentioned again. And this is why second-time mothers are so much better informed, because sadly, far too many of them are having the exact experiences that they didn't want. And then they realise the information that they need to know for next time.
Yeah.
So that's what a woman can do to better prepare herself, is to be thoroughly educated and to be ready to say no. And sometimes, in order for us to be ready to say no, to be able to stand in our own authority, we need to do a little bit of work on ourselves and, be really, really clear about what it is that we're wanting for our birth experiences and why, and then be willing to give that to ourselves. And whether that means standing up to care providers, standing up to very well-meaning family members, partners, all of that. So,
and it can be done.
Yeah. It can be done. That is the wonderful news.
Yeah.
Yeah. The work that I do. Sorry?
Yeah, no, I can talk from experience that I fought my whole way through. As a second-time mum, as a first-time mum, I didn't know. And I wish the reason why I want to bring these videos is so that first-time mums, as you said, second-time mums know, because they go through the experience and they say, well, I don't want to experience that again. But I want to get the message out to first-time mums so they understand that this birthing system that we live in now is not actually normal. It's physiological birth is actually normal, but unfortunately it doesn't happen. And so they can watch these videos, become informed, and can actually set themselves up. But I also think that they need to have set themselves up with the right care provider. And there's so many different support systems and care providers, like a private midwife, home birth, whether you're going to have a hospital birth, whether you go private, or you find an obstetrician who actually is birth friendly and not just someone who says that he's going to do everything and then switches it up at 38 weeks and said, oh, actually now your baby might be 4 kilos, we're going to do an induction. And you think, well, I paid him $10,000, I'll just listen to him, he knows what he's doing, and you're stuck basically. But I did fight and advocate for myself, and I got kicked out of hospital at 37 weeks actually. Nothing had changed. I was no higher risk than I was originally. It was just the fact that they couldn't get me to submit to a induction through their bullying tactics, unfortunately. So I was sent to a different hospital, and I advocated, and I went into spontaneous labour. And I can tell you the amount of powerful feelings and joy that it brought to me, that I knew that my body wasn't broken, because I was told the whole way through, you need to be induced. And I'm like, why do I need to be induced? Like, my body's going to give birth, like, it's normal. Like, of course my body's going to go into labour, but you'll believe that unless you do it this way, that you won't go into labour. And I was like, yes, my body's amazing, I can do this, I'm in labour. And I just want other women to have that experience and to know that their bodies aren't broken as well, because often we can feel after an experience that our bodies are broken and we are a failure.
And, that's a pertinent place for us to mention that the number one cause of death amongst new mothers is suicide. So postpartum depression, post-traumatic stress syndrome, it's extremely real. And when the hormonal functioning of the body around that procreative period is messed with, it's any wonder that there's a bit of hormone imbalance going on in the postnatal period as well. So, it's extremely serious, the implications of induction. And yeah, there's a lot that women can do to be prepared. And some of it is, head work, and some of it is soul work. Being really ready to own your choices.
So
And
Nicole,
it's not something that we're encouraged to do in this culture as women, but it's growing.
You've given us so much insight today, Nicole, on induction, physiological birth, and the hormones as well, and that's included in pregnancy and through birth, and the benefits to that. What can we do if we want to get in contact with you? If anyone in the audience is wanting to get in contact with you right now, I know you've got an offer that is great. Then we want to hear all about it.
Yeah, great. Well, I work with a modality called Birth into Being. So my Facebook page is Birth into Being Australia. That is also the name of my Instagram profile. My website is mid-overhaul. So along with a lot of people, it comes with a disclaimer of there might be some stuff in there that's not entirely up to date, but there are some fantastic resources. If you are curious about birth imprinting and the way that birth experiences, both in the sort of dominant culture and your own birth experiences, can impact your own birth. Your own birth experiences can impact your births as a mother. Then go and check out my website, which is birthintobeing.com.au. And the freebie, which I believe you're going to post the link of, Ashley, is a 1-hour webinar that I did, or more like an online workshop, actually, that I did last year, where we're talking about why birth matters, how it impacts you, your family, your baby, what you can do to create birth imprints that serve you as you're preparing for birth again. And in that online workshop, we do 3 little mini processes. So they're just short, sweet, guided processes where we explore empowerment in the body, reclaiming and welcoming less familiar aspects of ourselves, like the bad girl that says no, I don't want that. And we're also looking at doing a little oxytocin release exercise. So sign up for that one below. And I'd love to talk with any of you who are wanting to do some of that inner work to prepare for birth second time around.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that goodness with us, and thank you for coming on as a guest. I'm so blessed to have had so many amazing women come on, and for you to come on and share your insight and wisdom with us today.
My pleasure, Ashley. And, everybody deserves to have a beautiful birth.
Thanks for watching this episode. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, our mailing list, and follow us on our social channels so you never miss an episode. All our details are listed in the description box in YouTube. I look forward to bringing you another great episode next week. Welcome to our circle of support, Mama, with the Motherhood Circle. See you next week. With love, Ashley.